teaspoons of fresh beetroot. As you age, your nitric oxide levels go down, but a clinically studied plant-based formula supports increased nitric oxide production, healthy blood pressure, heart healthy energy, and stamina, and supports healthy circulation and blood flow. There are other products out there, but nothing close that stands on the science that Super Beats does. The power of nitric oxide is essential to a healthy body, so choose Super Beats Black Cherry and Original Apple to support your body's nitric oxide production, healthy blood pressure, and heart health. Find out how to get a free 30-day supply plus free shipping at shopsuperbeats.com.
Hey, welcome to Game Time. Nabil Karim alongside Sean Powell. Sam Mitchell. Happy New Year, everybody. 8 games in the NBA to get 2024 going. Lots of great highlights, especially with the Knicks and Minnesota here, because we got to see OG Anunoby for the first time with his new team, taking on a very good T-Wolves squad. And that's OG's first bucket right there.
He's gonna get shots like that tonight. Your first game.
Night for Minnesota.
How about the defense here from Isaiah Hartenstein?
That was not a good shot.
Dude, you gotta change that.
Man, Julius Randle had it going all game.
Yeah, off the dribble, takes it all the way to the hole. Great game.
The history of the Bible. The completed Bible is dated approximately in 300 AD. It is full of metaphors, symbolisms, stories, codes, and illustrations for the Christian's greater understanding. The story of the Hebrew people has a lot of value. It is taking a complicated story about creation and simplifying the event. After research, I no longer agree that this version of creation is the detailed truth or the first mention or writings of creation. Hebrew history dates back approximately 6,000 years according to Christian history, yet the earth is said to be around 4.5 billion years old. There had to be people on the planet before the story of Genesis, and their experiences and existence took place thousands of years before the Hebrew people's account. It was written in the USA Today that the oldest human remains existed approximately 230,000 years ago, and the evidence was revealed in the 1960s, which certainly predates the 6,000-year theory of the Hebrew people. Although this date contradicts the date that I will mention from other articles cited, the fact is that these remains were discovered thousands of years before the representation of the Hebrew people. With this understanding, there are at least 6 other popular writings that I will mention that would challenge the dating and story of the Hebrews' version of creation. Versions such as the Book of Coming Forth by Day that was written and used from the beginning of the New Kingdom to around 50 BCE, the Memphite text, dated 4000 to 3500 BCE, the Epic of Gilgamesh, dating from 2150 to 1400 BCE, the Atrahasis dated 1646 to 1626 BCE, the Enuma Elish, dated 1100 BCE, and the Emerald Tablets, 700 to 800 BCE. These writings tell their stories.
Julius, was the way you started it with 15 points against the best team in the West. How important was it to set that tone early?
Very important. The past 3 games in a row, we've been getting off the slow starts. So it was important for us to, at home, get off to a fast start and carry that over.
Your play with OG in the Knicks uniform for the first time tonight, 17 and 6, 35 minutes. What stands out to you about what he was able to do tonight?
Yeah, he's a competitor. He makes timely shots, timely plays on the defensive end, and he has to guard the best players. So it's not an easy job, but he did.
Bible. This compilation of scripture called the Bible has become the world's most valuable and read book. The Greek word for Bible is biblos, which is not in the book's entirety. This word, biblos, means many books, which would indicate that the Bible is not just one book. The Bible should not be considered a single book, it contains many scriptures and letters. When approaching this book, you should understand that you are dealing with multiple documents. It is compiled into many different categories. The first books/letters gathered were established as Catholic doctrine and included 73 books. However, Christianity eliminated the 7 books called the Apocrypha in the Catholic Bible when Catholicism became Christianity. When you look at the construction of the New Testament scriptures, you see multiple divisions. The New Testament scriptures are arranged into sections. According to that author, it is broken down into the area called the Gospels, giving a new concept called Catholicism/Christianity and eventually the new beginning of a new life for all those who embrace its content. Yeshua wrote none of the Gospel letters, so who wrote them? These stories are hearsay because, historically, only 2 of the 4 authors were said to have been with Yeshua. I say this because these men who wrote the Gospel message were illiterate. How could they have possibly noted or afforded to have a document written that would summarize the life of Yeshua? When looking at the New Testament, you have several different perspectives on Christianity. You have the book of Acts that presents the stories of the early local church. This book is said to have been written by Luke, who was not an apostle of Yeshua and was informed of his information by the apostle Peter. There are the 13 letters of Paul. They are considered to be the New Testament scripture. They are letters said to have been written by Paul to specific churches within the area. The followers of Yeshua established these churches to establish and enforce this new religion called Catholicism/Christianity. The Apostle Paul wrote to those who were considered to be Gentiles and not necessarily Jewish. There is also the book of Hebrews, to which there is no real known author, but it gives some historical background of the Hebrew culture for the Gentiles to understand the Jewish religious philosophy. Then you have the Hebraic books, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd and 3rd John, and Jude. They would be considered the letters of the Hebrews. Their writings represent some of the historical nuances of the Old Testament. And finally, the book of Revelations, the said book of the future. There is so much symbolism, codes, and metaphors in this book that this book becomes tough to interpret or understand, and this is the most feared book by many Christians and some pastors today. This book represents the end of all creation and the beginning of a new world. In the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Septuagint are called the Torah. They are said to have been written by Moses and are the scriptures of the Hebrews/Israelites' history. The book of Genesis suggests the genetics of the Hebrews, and it records the Hebrews' genetical civilization beginning with the progenitors, Adam and Eve. You also have the books called the Law, which includes Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Then there are the books of the prophets, 12 major and 12 minor, that are said to be symbolic of the zodiac system. There is a section called the Chronicles and the books of Kings. And finally, you have the books of wisdom, the Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Songs of Solomon. These 39 books report the time and history of the Hebrew people. In understanding the Bible, we must first know that the scriptures compiled into a book have a specific design. The design established the control of all those who would ascribe to it. Although the Catholic Church initially wrote to control the new group of Jewish individuals, who were Hebrews, it eventually became the controlling mechanism for most of society. These individuals, the Jews, were indoctrinated with this information to change their thinking and become this new culture of religion called Judaism. Over time, this book has evolved into a powerful vehicle used with the same intent in every religious country. Because this book is in metaphors, symbolisms, poetry, and codes, it is challenging to acquire the true meaning of what is said. Because of that, the truth of history is misrepresented and intentionally skewed for the reader. Therefore, to truly understand our history and genetics, we must begin to do our due diligence and uncover the truth. Until we do that, we will always be considered orphans who have been adopted into a family without love or connections. The Bible. The Holy Bible, written and compiled and then published in the Eastern and Western world, has become and is considered the Book of God. And the God of this Bible is called Yehovah Elohim. This representation of power is not the creator of the universe. He became the God of the Hebrew people. This book is said to be the history of the Hebrew/Jewish people, Although multiple writings predate this history, it has been recorded and suggested that this is the book of the beginning of time and creation. The historical dating of time for the Hebrew people is a short period based on the totality of periods of the world. There are multiple periods recorded in history, therefore, when we designate these periods as ages, we can consider those periods as the beginning and ending of those times' existence. We know that